The arrival. Jack, a human miner from Earth, stepped off the sleek intergalactic transport ship onto the soft, glowing surface of the alien world Sci-Lun. The air shimmered with faint streaks of blue, and the ground felt like stepping on pillows. Jack, tall and broad-shouldered, towered over the fragile-looking Xylunians who stared at him with wide, shimmering eyes. The Xylunians were tiny, with translucent skin that seemed to glow under the planet's pale light. They looked like they might snap in half if the wind blew too hard. For Jack, this was supposed to be a simple job: help the Xylunians with their mining operations. Earth had sent him because humans were known for surviving on dangerous Deathworlds, planets filled with deadly predators, harsh weather, and unstable environments. Earthlings like Jack were tough, and the galaxy knew it. The Xylunians, on the other hand, lived on one of the safest planets in the galaxy. No predators, no storms, no danger. But their world had one major problem: it couldn't handle tremors. Even the smallest shake in the ground could cause buildings to collapse and cracks to split the surface. And for the Xylunians, that was terrifying. Jack walked into the main building of the colony, ducking slightly to avoid hitting his head on the low doorway. The colony leader, a tall Xylunian named Flyner, greeted him with a nervous smile. "Welcome to Xylun, Mr. Jack," Flyner said in a soft, musical voice. "We appreciate your help, but I must warn you. Our planet is delicate. Even the slightest vibration can be disastrous." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Vibration? You mean earthquakes?" Flyner nodded solemnly. "Yes, but even a small shake can cause a catastrophe here. We've heard stories about Earth's strength. You're kind. You're not like us." Jack chuckled, trying to ease the tension. "Relax, Flyner. I'm just here to help you dig. I'm not planning on breaking your planet." But Flyner didn't look convinced. The Xylunians had heard rumors about humans. They called Earth a death world, a place where only the strongest could survive. Stories of Earthlings fighting off wild beasts and enduring violent storms had spread across the galaxy. To the Xylunians, Jack seemed more like a walking earthquake than a person. As they walked through the colony, Jack noticed how fragile everything looked. The buildings were made of light materials, and the mining equipment seemed tiny compared to what he was used to. He couldn't help but grin. "This is what you call heavy machinery." Flyner stiffened. "It's perfectly suited for our needs," he said, but his voice wavered. He led Jack to the mining site, a wide pit surrounded by glowing rocks. The Xylunians worked slowly and carefully, their thin arms barely able to lift the small tools they carried. Jack rolled up his sleeves. "All right, let's see what we're working with." He reached for one of their tools, a small device meant for chipping at rocks, and accidentally broke it in half. The Xylunians gasped. One worker dropped his own tool in shock. Sorry about that," Jack said, holding up the broken pieces. "Guess I don't know my own strength." Flyner frowned but said nothing. Jack could feel their eyes on him, as if they were watching a wild animal that might attack at any moment. He shrugged and decided to stretch his arms before getting to work. The long journey had made his muscles stiff, and he felt a cramp building in his shoulder. As Jack stretched, the ground beneath him rumbled ever so slightly. It was barely noticeable to him, but to the Xylunians, it was like the sky falling. Flyner's eyes widened in horror. "What was that?" he whispered. Jack glanced around. What was what? "The rumble," Flyner said, his voice rising. "Did you feel it?" The ground shook. Jack frowned, confused. "Oh, that was just me stretching. I've got a muscle cramp." Flyner's jaw dropped. The other Xylunians started whispering to each other, their voices trembling. They didn't understand. To them, the idea that a human's simple movement could cause a rumble in the ground was terrifying. "Your muscle cramp?" Flyner asked, his voice barely audible. Jack shrugged. "Yeah. Long trip. It happens." But Flyner didn't relax. He turned to the other Xylunians and said, We need to report this to the Council immediately. Jack sighed, realizing the Tylunians had misunderstood. Look, it's not a big deal. I promise. I'm not going to break your planet. But the Tylunians weren't listening. They hurried off, leaving Jack alone at the mining site. He shook his head and muttered, "Great. First day on the job, and they already think I'm a walking disaster." As Jack stood there, watching the glowing rocks in the pit, he felt another faint twinge in his arm. He shook it off, not realizing that for the Tylunians, his every movement had already become a source of fear. In the distance, the colony's alarm system buzzed faintly. Jack could see tiny figures running around, their voices echoing in the quiet air. He sighed again, muttering to himself, "This is going to be a long job." But deep beneath the surface of Xylun, something stirred. The ground shifted ever so slightly, unnoticed by Jack or the Tylunians. Whatever was happening underground, it wasn't just about a human strength, it was something far bigger. The alien misunderstanding. Jack leaned against a metal beam at the mining site, watching the Tylunians scurry around the colony. Their delicate frames moved with a mix of urgency and panic. They weren't running because of any real danger, at least not in Jack's eyes. No, this was about him. The whispers, the stares, the way they clutched their tools like they might need to defend themselves. It was clear. They thought he was the problem. Back in the colony's central hub, Flyner stood before the council. The circular chamber glowed faintly from the walls, and the council members, 5 elder Gailunians with translucent, shimmering forms, sat in raised seats, looking down at him. Flyner's voice trembled as he explained, "Esteemed council, the Earthling, Jack, may be a threat to our planet's stability." We felt tremors while he was stretching. Stretching, of all things. One of the elders, named Siran, tilted their head thoughtfully. "You believe his body movements caused the ground to shake?" "Yes," Flyner said quickly, his translucent skin darkening with stress. He mentioned a muscle cramp. For humans, that might be something dangerous. Another elder, Dariel, sighed. "We agreed to invite him because of his mining expertise. Earthlings are strong, but surely even they can't cause earthquakes with a simple stretch." Flyner shook his head, his voice rising. "You don't understand. Earthlings are from a death world. Their bodies are adapted to extreme environments. For them, this planet is as fragile as glass." The council exchanged glances. Finally, Siren spoke again. "We will monitor the Earthling. If he poses a risk, we must take measures to protect our colony." Meanwhile, at the mining site, Jack sat cross-legged on the soft ground, eating a protein bar and scanning the horizon. Xylun was beautiful, in a strange way. The sky was a constant swirl of soft blues and silvers, and the ground seemed to hum faintly underfoot. It was peaceful, too peaceful. For a guy used to dodging avalanches and wild predators back on Earth, this place felt almost boring. His communicator buzzed. Flyner's voice came through, sounding strained. "Jack, we've decided to run a test." "A test?" Jack asked, raising an eyebrow. "What kind of test?" "Just to ensure your presence isn't causing any unintended harm," Flyner said, dodging the question. "Please come to the central hub." Jack sighed. "Fine, but I told you, I'm not causing earthquakes." As he made his way to the hub, Jack noticed more Xylunians watching him. Their wide, shimmering eyes followed his every move. Some whispered, others darted out of sight. One alien child pointed at him and whispered loudly, "Is that the earthquake bringer?" Jack groaned. Earthquake bringer? Seriously? The strength suppression test. The central hub was bustling with nervous activity when Jack arrived. Flyner greeted him at the door, flanked by 2 council members. "Thank you for coming, Jack," Flyner said, his voice tight. "This won't take long." "Let me guess," Jack said, crossing his arms. You want to see how dangerous I am." Flyner hesitated. "It's for everyone's safety." Jack rolled his eyes, but followed them into a large chamber. At the center stood a massive glowing boulder, suspended on an anti-gravity platform. It shimmered with an iridescent light, casting faint rainbows across the walls. "This," Flyner explained, "is one of the heaviest objects we have mined. No Xylunian can lift it." Jack smirked. "You want me to try?" Flyner nodded. "If you can lift it, it will help us understand the extent of your strength." Jack cracked his knuckles, stepping up to the boulder. The room went silent as every Xylunian held their breath. Jack placed his hands on the cool surface of the boulder and gave it a testing nudge. It barely moved. "Finally, something with a little weight," he muttered. With a small grunt, Jack lifted the boulder off the platform. The anti-gravity field flickered as it adjusted to the sudden shift, and the room erupted in gasps. "That's it," Jack said, holding the boulder above his head like it was nothing. "This isn't heavy." The Xylunians looked like they might faint. Flyner stepped back, his face pale. "Put it down. Carefully," he stammered. Jack lowered the boulder back onto the platform with a thud. The anti-gravity field shuddered, and the ground beneath the chamber trembled slightly. The faint rumble sent the Xylunians into a panic. "See," one council member whispered. "His strength disrupts our stability." Jack threw up his hands. "That wasn't me. It's this anti-gravity thing. It's unstable." But the council wasn't listening. They were already speaking in hushed tones, their fear mounting. The growing rumor. As Jack left the chamber, he could hear the whispers spreading like wildfire. The Earthling lifted the boulder, without effort. "He's too strong for our world. What if he gets angry? He could destroy the colony." Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. "These people are ridiculous," he muttered. "It's just a little muscle." But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The ground had rumbled again, but was it really him? Or was there something happening beneath the surface of Xylun? Cliffhanger. That night, as Jack sat alone in his quarters, he felt another faint vibration under his feet. This one was stronger, more distinct. He looked out the window at the quiet colony, the glowing buildings casting soft light against the darkness. "Okay," he muttered. "That wasn't me." Far below the surface, something shifted again. A deep, slow movement that went unnoticed by all but the Earthling who had learned to feel danger in the ground. Jack's instincts kicked in. He knew trouble was brewing. The only question was, would the Xylunians believe him before it was too late? The test. The night air on Xylun was calm, but Jack couldn't shake the uneasy feeling settling in his gut. The rumble he'd felt earlier. Was it a coincidence? Was it just his muscles tensing? Or was there something more? He wasn't sure, but he knew that Xylunians had taken things a step further than he ever expected. The next morning, Flyner's urgent message echoed in Jack's ears as he walked toward the central hub again. "We must conduct a more thorough test, Jack. For the safety of everyone and our world. Please meet us at the mining site." Jack grimaced. The last thing he wanted was more of these tests. But he learned one thing during his time on Xylun. When an alien leader asked for something, it was wise to comply, especially when they were already terrified of you. The test begins. Jack arrived at the mining site, and the moment he stepped onto the soft, glowing ground, the Xylunians scattered. It was as though they had been expecting something disastrous to happen with every step he took. The whispers started again. "Earthquake bringer," one alien murmured, glancing at Jack before quickly looking away. Flyner stood at the edge of the site, his nervous eyes darting around as if searching for something. Anything unusual. "Jack, we're ready for the next phase," he said, though his voice wavered slightly. "This time, we want to test your true strength. We cannot afford to take chances." Jack rolled his shoulders, annoyed. He didn't want to hurt anyone, but at this point, it seemed like the only way to get them off his back was to show them he meant no harm. "All right, let's get it over with," Jack said, his tone dry. A large metal platform was wheeled out in front of him. A heavy, cylindrical piece of alien mining equipment rested atop it, much bigger and sturdier than anything Jack had ever seen. "We've calibrated the gravity settings for your Earthling strength," Flyner explained. "This machine is designed to lift weights far beyond what we Xylunians can handle. Your task is simple. We want you to activate the lifting mechanism and raise this cylinder." Jack eyed the machine with interest. "Looks like a piece of cake," he muttered, walking up to it. But as he inspected it closely, something caught his attention. The metal gears seemed a little too old, and the hydraulic lifts were barely functioning, showing signs of wear and tear. Whatever was happening beneath Saloon's surface, whether it was his so-called strength or something else, had begun to put a strain on everything. "Ready?" Flyner's voice brought him back to the moment. Jack nodded, cracking his knuckles. "Ready." The test goes wrong. The moment Jack pressed the button, the machine hummed to life, its gears whirring loudly. For a few seconds, everything seemed fine. The massive cylinder began to rise, slowly at first, and Jack kept a steady hand on the controls. The Xylunians, who had gathered around to watch, held their breath. For the first time since his arrival, Jack felt like maybe, just maybe, he could show them he wasn't a threat. But then, suddenly, something changed. The machine made an odd screeching noise, and the cylinder jerked in Jack's hands. He tried to steady it, but the lifting mechanism malfunctioned. A loud crack rang through the air, followed by another tremor. This time, stronger than before. The ground beneath Jack's feet shuddered, and the shockwave rippled through the colony. Buildings began to shake, dust poured down from the ceilings, and the Xylunians screamed in terror. "The earthquake! The earthquake!" Someone shouted. "No, it's not me." Jack shouted back, feeling the ground beneath him crack. "It's the machine. This thing's faulty." But his words were drowned out by the chaos around him. The cylinder wobbled uncontrollably as the lifting system broke down. Jack tried to lower it, but the malfunctioning gears made it impossible. His grip tightened as he struggled to stabilize the machine. The ground shook harder, and a large chunk of rock near the mining pit broke free, sending rubble crashing to the ground. Jack barely managed to pull the cylinder back down, but the damage was done. The Xylunians were already fleeing in panic, their thin bodies racing toward the nearest shelters. A shocking discovery. After the tremors stopped, Jack stood, breathless, in the middle of the ruined mining site. His heart raced, and his mind spun with confusion. What had just happened? His muscle cramp? The faulty machine? Or was there something deeper happening on Saloon that he hadn't yet understood? Flyner and the other council members rushed toward him, their eyes filled with fear and accusation. You've done it," Flyner said, his voice shaking. "This is your fault. You brought the tremors to our world." Jack shook his head in frustration. "No, Flyner, it wasn't me. I swear, it's the equipment. You saw it malfunction. You saw it break." But Flyner wasn't listening. He looked past Jack, staring at the damaged machinery. "Your Earthling strength is too much for our world to handle," he said, voice full of panic. "Perhaps it's better you leave now, before you destroy us all." Cliffhanger, the unseen threat. Just as Jack opened his mouth to argue, a new tremor struck, this one deeper, more violent, as if the entire planet itself was groaning. The sky above them flickered with an eerie green glow, and the ground rumbled in a way that felt different from before. It wasn't the normal aftershock of a quake. It was something more ominous. "Flyner," Jack shouted, pointing toward the horizon, where the ground was beginning to crack open. "This isn't me. Something's happening below us. Something big." Flyner's eyes widened in terror as he saw what Jack saw. The cracks in the earth stretched out in all directions, splitting the ground open like a wound. The Xylunians froze, unable to comprehend what was happening. "It's not you," Flyner whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's the planet. It's shaking because of something else." As the ground continued to split, Jack felt his instincts flare. Something far more dangerous than his muscle cramp was stirring beneath Tyloon, and he had a feeling it wasn't going to stop anytime soon. The real problem. The ground trembled once more, this time with a force that sent a chilling shiver through Jack's spine. His heart raced, but his mind was already racing faster. This wasn't just another shake. Something was wrong. The tremors weren't just caused by him, the malfunctioning machine, or even his muscle cramps. No, this was something far bigger, something hidden beneath the surface of Tyloon, and it was only just beginning to reveal itself. "Get back!" Jack shouted to the Tyloonians, who were still frozen in place, staring in horror at the widening cracks in the earth. Their delicate bodies trembled as they moved with slow, hesitant steps, retreating toward the colony's nearest shelter. But Jack could feel it in his bones. The ground was shifting beneath their feet. Flyner, still standing at Jack's side, glanced around frantically, his eyes wide with panic. "What is happening? This wasn't supposed to happen. You were supposed to help us." Jack swallowed hard, but there was no time for explanations. "It's not me, Flyner. It's the planet. The tremors. They are coming from deep beneath us." He looked around at the destroyed mining site, the cracked walls of the colony, and the widening fissures in the ground. "We have to figure out what's down there, or Tyloon is going to tear itself apart." A desperate search. The Tyloonians huddled in their shelters, watching from a distance as Jack paced back and forth, trying to make sense of what was happening. The planet was supposed to be safe, stable. No one had ever experienced anything like this before. The council members remained behind, whispering among themselves, though Jack could catch fragments of their conversation. "We knew there were underground systems, but nothing like this," one council member murmured. This is something different." Jack caught wind of their words and turned to Flyner. "Underground systems? What systems? What are you talking about?" Flyner hesitated, his expression darkening. "We have mining tunnels, old ones, long abandoned. They connect the various parts of the colony. But they were never supposed to be used. They were sealed off centuries ago after something happened." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" Flyner glanced over his shoulder nervously, then lowered his voice. "No one really knows. The records are fragmented. Some say there were tremors then too, much worse than these, but the elders decided to seal everything up, bury it, and forget. They didn't want to risk reopening the tunnels." Jack clenched his jaw. "And now the tunnels are waking up." Flyner nodded slowly, his eyes grim. "Yes, something down there is causing this. And if we don't find out what it is..." Jack didn't need to hear the rest. The thought of an unknown, powerful force hidden beneath their feet was enough. If they didn't act fast, the tremors would get worse, and there would be no colony left to save. The descent. With Flyner's reluctant blessing, Jack made his way to the sealed-off entrance of one of the ancient mining tunnels. The Tyloonians had built the entrance into the side of a rocky cliff, hidden from the view of the colony. The heavy steel doors were engraved with old symbols, worn by time, but still sturdy enough to withstand the test of centuries. Jack pressed a button on the side of the door, and a low hum echoed as the seal released. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel that seemed to stretch far deeper into the planet's crust than Jack had expected. The air that spilled out was thick, stale, and smelled faintly of metal and old earth. "You sure about this?" Jack asked, turning to Flyner, who was standing behind him, still hesitant. Flyner bit his lip, then nodded. "The council doesn't want you going in, but I trust you. We don't have any other choice." With a deep breath, Jack stepped into the tunnel. The Tyloonian leader hesitated for only a moment before following. The tunnel stretched out in front of them, the walls lined with ancient, rusted equipment, cables that had long since been abandoned, and faint light sources that flickered weakly as they passed. The deeper they went, the heavier the atmosphere felt. The air grew thicker, almost as if the very earth was holding its breath. The source of the tremors. After what seemed like an eternity, Jack and Fliner reached the heart of the tunnel, a massive underground chamber far deeper than the colony had ever dug. The walls were lined with strange machinery, far more advanced than the Silunians' current technology, but also old, ancient. The room itself felt cold, as if it had been untouched for millennia. At the center of the chamber was a massive energy core, pulsing with an eerie green light. It hummed with power, sending vibrations through the ground even now. The core was surrounded by cracked pipes and cables, remnants of a system long abandoned. "This is it," Jack whispered, his voice filled with awe. "This is what's causing the tremors." Fliner stepped forward cautiously. "What is it? Why is it still active?" Jack moved closer to the core, his mind racing. "I don't know, but it looks like some sort of power generator or weapon." He examined the controls, but the interface was alien to him. It seemed as if the core had been deactivated long ago, only to be slowly reactivated by something deep within the planet. "It's like it's waking up." Suddenly, the ground beneath them rumbled violently. Jack staggered back, gripping a nearby pillar to steady himself. "We don't have much time," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "That core, it's going to keep sending shockwaves through the planet. If we don't shut it down now, it'll tear Kailun apart." Fliner's eyes widened with panic. "How do we stop it?" Jack looked around, trying to find some way to disable the core. His mind raced. It wasn't just the machinery that was causing the tremors. It was something more, something older. The core had been built with a purpose, but what purpose? And why had it been hidden away for so long? Before he could form a plan, the chamber suddenly began to shake. The floor cracked, and huge fissures appeared beneath their feet. Fliner screamed, and Jack grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the exit. "Move, now," Jack shouted, but the tremors grew stronger, sending debris crashing down from the ceiling. The core pulsed brighter, the energy in the room increasing. The planet was reacting, and Jack realized they were running out of time. Cliffhanger. The countdown. As they scrambled toward the exit, the chamber began to collapse around them. Jack could hear the grinding of metal and the crushing of stone. The planet was tearing itself apart. They had to get out before they were buried alive. But Jack knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a random disaster. The core was something far more dangerous than they realized, and if they didn't find a way to stop it, Silun would be lost forever. The ground shook violently again, and the exit door slammed shut behind them, trapping them in the collapsing tunnel. Jack's heart pounded. They were running out of time. And in the distance, the hum of the core grew louder, like a ticking bomb ready to destroy everything in its path. The rescue. The tunnel was collapsing around them, and every step felt like it might be their last. Jack pulled Fliner along, each passing second growing more critical. The ground trembled violently, and jagged rocks fell from the ceiling, crashing to the floor in loud, echoing thuds. The rumbling from the deep core grew louder, pulsing through the ground with an unnatural intensity. It was clear now. The core wasn't just a power source. It was a ticking time bomb, slowly ripping the planet apart. "Fliner, we need to get out of here now," Jack shouted, his voice strained as he tugged the alien forward. The Tylunian leader stumbled, clearly struggling to keep up. "I'm not leaving you behind, but you've got to move faster." Fliner's translucent skin was pale, his fragile legs shaking from fear and exhaustion. I can't. The tunnel, it's collapsing too quickly. There's no way out." Jack turned, scanning the crumbling passage behind them. The walls were cracking, and the once sturdy tunnel was being torn apart by tremors. The exit seemed miles away, and the exit door they had come through was now blocked by falling debris. The shaking grew stronger, and Jack's mind raced for an idea. He didn't have much time. He had to think, and fast. A narrow escape. Suddenly, A loud crash came from above them, and a heavy boulder dislodged from the ceiling. It plummeted toward them, too fast for either of them to escape. Jack acted on instinct, shoving Flyner out of the way and diving to the side. The boulder hit the ground with a deafening boom, sending a cloud of dust and debris into the air. Jack felt his heart pounding in his chest. He had narrowly missed being crushed, but the danger wasn't over. The entire tunnel was collapsing in real time, with more rocks and boulders falling every second. The ground beneath their feet was buckling, and it was only a matter of time before the tunnel caved in completely. "We're not going to make it," Flyner gasped, scrambling to his feet. "Yes, we are," Jack said, his voice steady despite the panic rising in his chest. "But we need to move. Now." With one final burst of strength, Jack pulled Flyner to his feet and started sprinting toward a narrow side passage he had spotted earlier. It was a gamble. The tunnel could be just as unstable, but they didn't have a choice. The tremors were worsening, and their only chance was to outrun the destruction. As they ran, the ground continued to shake beneath them, throwing them off balance. Jack gritted his teeth, refusing to let the fear take over. They had to make it out of here. They didn't just have the Cylunian colony to save. They had the entire planet's future at stake. The narrow passage was cramped and tight, forcing them to slow down. Jack's muscles burned, but he couldn't afford to stop. Behind them, the main tunnel groaned and collapsed in on itself with an ominous sound. They were running out of time. Every second counted. The final collapse. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jack and Flyner reached a small cavern that seemed to be unaffected by the tremors. At least for now. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give them a moment of respite. Jack let out a heavy breath, slumping against a rock wall. His body was sore, and his mind was spinning. "We're safe for now, but that won't last." Flyner leaned against the opposite wall, his breath shallow. You saved my life, but we can't stay here. The core, it's only going to get worse. If we don't stop it soon, there won't be anything left to save." Jack nodded grimly. He knew Flyner was right. The core's power was growing stronger by the second. They didn't have time to rest. They had to finish what they started. "You've got a plan, right?" Flyner asked, his voice tight with anxiety. "How do we stop that thing?" Jack scanned the cavern, his mind racing. "The core is powering itself. We need to cut off its power supply. If we can find the main control room, we might be able to shut it down manually." Flyner's eyes widened. "But the control room, no one's been in there for centuries. It's a maze of tunnels and old systems. It's dangerous." "I've dealt with worse," Jack said, determination in his voice. "And we don't have a choice." A plan in motion. The two of them set off again, moving deeper into the maze of tunnels. The air was getting thicker, and the sound of the core pulsing beneath them was growing louder, almost deafening. But Jack kept his focus, ignoring the constant tremors in the ground. If he didn't find that control room, Cylun would be lost. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach. The planet wasn't just shaking. It was dying. After what felt like an eternity of twisting, narrow passages, they finally reached a door at the end of a long hallway. It was old, made of a dark, metallic alloy, but still strong. Jack could see faint markings on the door, the same strange symbols that had been on the sealed entrance earlier. "This must be it," Jack said, examining the door. The tremors were relentless, the ground rumbling beneath his feet. Every second felt like an hour. Flyner hesitated. This is where the records say the control system is." "But, Jack, I don't know what's inside. It's been sealed off for a reason." Jack placed a hand on the door. "We don't have the luxury of time, Flyner. If we don't get in there now, we're all going to die. Do you understand?" Flyner swallowed hard, nodding. I understand." With a grunt, Jack pushed the door open, the rusty hinges creaking as the heavy metal door slid aside. Inside, the control room was dark. the only light coming from a series of flickering consoles that lined the walls. The room was abandoned, long forgotten by the Tylunians, but the hum of the core, still growing louder, filled the air like a death knell. Cliffhanger. The truth behind the core. Jack's eyes scanned the room, searching for anything that could shut the core down. As he moved toward a large console in the center of the room, something strange happened. The humming of the core shifted, growing sharper, more focused. He turned just in time to see Flyner freeze in place, his eyes wide with terror. "Jack, there's something wrong. Look." Jack turned to find a massive, glowing screen on the wall flickering to life. Strange symbols appeared, followed by an image of the core itself, its energy levels rapidly escalating. And then, in bold letters across the screen, a message appeared. "System override in puro juries, initiated by unforgettable." Jack's blood ran cold. What does that mean? Flyner stepped back, his voice barely a whisper. Someone else is controlling the core. Someone or something is making it worse. Jack's mind spun. The truth was far darker than he imagined. They weren't dealing with an ancient machine. They were dealing with an enemy that was already manipulating Cylun's fate, and now it was up to them to stop it, before it was too late. The last chance. The hum of the core reverberated through the control room like the beating of a dying heart. Jack stood frozen in front of the flickering console, his mind racing with the implications of the message. "System override in puro juries, initiated by unforgettable." It wasn't just the core that had awakened. It was something else, something much darker. The tremors, the increasing power. The ancient system below Cylun was not only active, it was being controlled. Flyner's voice was barely audible, his face pale. Jack, who could be controlling it? The records. No one's ever even tried to access the core in centuries. Jack's fists clenched. He couldn't answer that question, not yet. What mattered now was stopping the core before it ripped Cylun apart. But every second they wasted was a second closer to disaster. "I don't know, Flyner," Jack said, his voice steady but strained. "But we don't have time to find out. If we don't shut this thing down, we'll never get the chance to ask." The core's power was increasing. Jack could feel the ground beneath his feet vibrating with each passing moment. Whatever was happening, the planet was on the verge of a full-scale collapse. But the question remained, how could they stop something this powerful when it was no longer just a machine? How could they defeat an enemy that was controlling the very heart of Cylun? The real enemy. Jack turned back to the console, scanning the strange symbols and codes flashing on the screen. If there was a way to shut the core down manually, it was hidden in this mess of alien technology. He pressed a series of buttons, trying to decipher the commands, but nothing seemed to work. It was as though the system was designed to resist any attempt at deactivation. Then, a thought struck him like a bolt of lightning. What if the control wasn't in the system at all? What if it was a person, or something else, on the planet that was forcing the system to stay active? Someone or something that had knowledge of the core's power. Jack whirled around to Flyner, his face tense. "Do you have any idea who could control this system? Any ancient technology we haven't uncovered?" Flyner shook his head. "The old records don't say anything about an outside force. But we do have legends, stories passed down through generations. They speak of a Watcher, a mysterious being that existed long before we even settled on Cylun." Jack's brow furrowed. "A Watcher?" Flyner nodded. "Yes. The stories claimed that the Watcher had control over the planet's core and all its systems. It was said to be a guardian of sorts, watching over the planet's stability. But the Watcher was lost. We assumed it was just a myth." Jack's mind raced. A guardian? Or a puppet master? Was the Watcher a person? Or something more? The more he thought about it, the more it sounded like this ancient entity wasn't just watching over Cylun. It had been manipulating it from the shadows. Where's the Watcher now? Jack asked, his voice tight with urgency. I don't know, Flyner admitted. But there are rumors. Some believe the Watcher still exists, buried somewhere beneath the surface, controlling the core. And if that's true, we may not be able to stop it. A desperate decision. As the room began to shake once more, Jack realized that they were running out of time. The core was still ramping up its power, the energy levels rising so fast that it was like the planet was about to explode. If the Watcher was controlling the core from within, Jack knew that stopping the core would mean finding and confronting this mysterious force. But where would they begin? The underground systems stretched for miles, and the control room was only a small part of an ancient network that had long been forgotten. They didn't have much to go on, only rumors and stories. I'm going after the Watcher, Jack said, his voice hard with determination. If someone's controlling the core, then they're the key to shutting it down. We have to find them before it's too late. Flyner's eyes widened in disbelief. You can't be serious. If the Watcher is still alive, we don't even know what it's capable of. You could be walking into a trap. Jack met Flyner's gaze, his expression unflinching. If I don't, this whole world will be gone, and we'll never know what happened. I'm the only one strong enough to deal with this, whatever it is. Flyner hesitated, then nodded slowly, his face a mixture of fear and resolve. You're right. But be careful, Jack. We don't understand what this Watcher is, or what it wants. It's been controlling the core for centuries, and we have no idea what kind of power it has. Jack grabbed a small device from his pack, a communicator. I'll keep in touch, he said, then turned to the exit. If I don't make it back, tell the colony I tried. Without another word, he stepped out of the control room and into the dark tunnels. The deeper he went, the more the air seemed to hum with energy. The vibrations were almost constant now, a deep, throbbing pulse beneath the surface. He knew he was getting closer. But closer to what? And would he survive whatever lay ahead? The hunt for the Watcher. The path through the tunnels was treacherous. The walls seemed to shift with every tremor, the ground buckling beneath Jack's feet. The deeper he descended, the more it felt like the planet itself was alive, watching him, testing him. The hum of the core echoed in the distance, guiding him forward, like a heartbeat. He moved cautiously, knowing that whatever he was about to encounter, it wouldn't be easy. The deeper he went, the more the tunnels began to open up, revealing massive underground chambers. These weren't just mining sites. They looked ancient, abandoned long ago, as if they had been built by a civilization far older than the Silunians. The atmosphere in these chambers was heavy with a sense of foreboding. The walls were lined with strange symbols, identical to the ones on the console back in the control room. As Jack moved deeper into one of these vast chambers, he began to feel an odd presence, a pull, as though the very air was thick with ancient energy. Suddenly, the ground beneath him rumbled again, but this time, it wasn't the core. It was a different vibration, a hum, almost like a voice whispering through the walls. Jack's breath caught in his throat. This is it, he muttered, stepping forward into the heart of the chamber. The revelation. The Watcher stood tall in the center of the cavern, bathed in the eerie glow of ancient energy. The dark robes swirled around them like shadows in the dim light, and their glowing eyes fixed on Jack with an unsettling calm. The ground beneath Jack's feet vibrated with the increasing intensity of the core, and he could feel the pressure building, the very planet groaning with the effort of holding back destruction. You've come far, Earthling, the Watcher's voice echoed, deep and resonant, as if it reverberated directly in Jack's mind. But do you truly understand why I am here? Why I keep the core active? Jack clenched his fists, refusing to be intimidated by the being before him. I came to stop you. You're the reason Silune is tearing itself apart. If you don't shut down the core, this entire world will collapse. The Watcher's eyes flickered with an emotion Jack couldn't quite place. Was it amusement? Pity? Whatever it wasn't kindness. You misunderstand, the Watcher replied, its voice growing colder. I am not causing the collapse. I am preventing it. Jack's brow furrowed in confusion. Preventing it? What do you mean? The Watcher stepped forward, raising a hand as if to gesture at the very air around them. The shadows of the chamber seemed to flicker, revealing more of the hidden history of Cylune. Ancient carvings on the walls began to glow faintly, showing images of the Watcher in different forms, sometimes a being of light, sometimes a figure of shadow, always in control of the planet's core. I am the Guardian, the Watcher continued. I was created long ago to maintain the balance of this world. The core you call a weapon is, in fact, the lifeblood of Cylune. It keeps the planet alive, sustains its ecosystems, and ensures its continued existence. Without it, Cylune would have long since died. Jack's eyes widened. But the tremors, the quakes, they're destroying everything. How can this balance be maintained by causing destruction? The Watcher's smile faded, and its voice grew softer, almost regretful. The core's energy has always been volatile, a necessary danger to keep the world functioning. Without it, the planet would become stagnant, decaying under the weight of its own stability. It is the price of life, Earthling. Balance demands it. Jack took a step back, his mind racing. So, what's happening now? Why is it getting worse? The core is out of control. The Watcher's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, a flicker of something darker crossed its face. The core was under control, but something has shifted in the depths. The energy is increasing faster than it should. Something, or someone, is feeding it power, and I cannot stop it. Jack's heart raced. Someone's trying to make the planet explode. Who is it? The Watcher's voice turned grave. I do not know. Whoever it is has tapped into the core's energy, manipulating it for their own purposes. The system is no longer in my control. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. The dark force was at work, something more powerful than the Watcher. Someone who had been hiding in the shadows, pulling strings. This wasn't just about stopping the core. It was about uncovering the true enemy before they destroyed everything. A new enemy revealed. Just as the realization hit Jack, the chamber suddenly rumbled with an intensity that nearly knocked him off his feet. The Watcher's eyes widened, and the ground beneath them cracked open, sending a shockwave that sent both Jack and the Watcher tumbling. The walls around them split apart, revealing a massive, glowing fissure, a deep rift that stretched down into the core itself. From the depths of the rift, a voice boomed, dark and resonant, as if it was coming from the very heart of Cylune. You are too late, the voice sneered. The core is mine now, and soon the planet will be mine as well. Jack pushed himself to his feet, his heart racing. The Watchers stood beside him, staring into the rift, their eyes filled with a strange mixture of fear and fury. Who is that? Jack demanded. Who's speaking? The Watcher's voice was strained. That is the entity that has taken control of the core. The true Watcher. The one who existed before me. Jack's stomach twisted with dread. What do you mean before you? There's more than one Watcher. The Watcher nodded grimly. I was the Guardian placed here to protect Cylune after the original Watcher was consumed by its own power. This entity, it was the first. And now it seeks to return, to reclaim what it believes is rightfully its. The dark voice from the rift laughed, a sound that sent a shiver down Jack's spine. You think you can stop me, little human? You who can barely comprehend the power you're dealing with. You are nothing more than a bug in my path. Jack clenched his teeth. Not if I can help it. The final confrontation. Jack glanced at the Watcher, who seemed to be regaining some measure of composure. We have to stop it now, before it destroys everything. The Watcher's eyes gleamed with determination. I have the knowledge, Earthling, but I cannot access the full power of the core while it is in control of that entity. We must destroy the source, the entity itself, and sever its connection to the core. Jack nodded. Then let's do it, together. The Watcher raised a hand, and suddenly The rift expanded, sending a blast of dark energy toward them. The chamber trembled violently, the energy pulses from the core intensifying with every passing second. Jack instinctively jumped forward, dodging the blast, and the Watcher followed close behind, unleashing a barrier of energy to shield them. "We have no time to waste," the Watcher said, its voice low and filled with urgency. "If we don't act now, the planet will collapse. I'll need you to hold the rift open while I disrupt its control." Jack nodded, his mind focused. He couldn't let fear stop him now. This was the moment. He raised his hands, channeling every ounce of strength he had left into pushing against the rift's energy. The ground trembled beneath them, the core pulsing violently. Jack and the Watcher worked together, pushing against the dark entity's power. Jack felt the energy surge within him, the tension of the core's wrath surrounding them. It was a race against time. The dark voice from the rift howled in fury, "You cannot win. The core will be mine." But Jack was determined. Not today. With one final, earth-shaking push, Jack and the Watcher combined their strength. The rift cracked, and the dark energy erupted in a burst of light. For a moment, everything went white, and then silence. Aftermath. A new beginning. When the light faded, Jack opened his eyes, his body exhausted but alive. The core's pulsing energy had stopped. The tremors had ceased. The dark presence that had controlled Xylun was gone. The Watcher stood beside him, looking at the now-still core. "It is done. The entity is destroyed. The core will stabilize." Jack looked around the chamber. It felt like the planet itself had exhaled a sigh of relief. Xylun was no longer in danger. Flyner's voice echoed through the communicator. Jack, do you copy?" Jack smiled, breathing a sigh of relief. "I copy, Flyner. Xylun is safe." The Watcher looked at him, its gaze softer now. "You have done what I could not, Earthling. Xylun owes you its survival." Jack nodded, his face serious but resolute. "It wasn't just me. We did this together." And as the light from the core dimmed, signaling the end of the chaos, Jack knew that Xylun was free. At least for now. But somewhere, deep beneath the surface, he couldn't shake the feeling that Xylun's story was far from over.